you don't go to school and learn this is how to tell the story of your life. This is how to tell the cool story of your day. Because it's just, there's this idea, you should know it. You should have picked it up through scaffolding, through osmosis, from out there. You've watched movies, you've listened to podcasts, you've listened to songs on the radio. How can you not know how to tell a story? Well, it's different. And so you don't know because no one taught you.
Welcome to Storytelling Insights, art, science, and great conversations with storytelling insights from researchers, artists, teachers, and many more. Really great to have you, Dan. Dan runs Storyluck, which is, if I'm not mistaken, Dan, it's all about bringing stories to audiences and also finding stories and inviting people to share stories as well. Welcome, and please share a little bit about you and your work.
Yeah, so we've been creating stories for 11 years now, going on 12, and basically we're a group of friends who got together and we created this nonprofit. It's a 501c3, and we just needed a corporate container that would house all the crazy cool things that we wanted to do in Chicago. And so, yeah, it's a wide range. And what we're doing a lot now is teaching storytelling and just searching out other people's stories. But we've done giant games of tag run across the whole city. We had a show where every month people in the audience would choose a task that all of our core members had to go out and do that task. And just sort of everything in between, where almost all our shows are potlucks. And so there's always food. We think food goes well with storytelling. Yeah. And that's it. Like, if somebody joins the group and then they have a good idea, we just support them in creating it.
Yeah. That's incredible. So is the main purpose to get people to express themselves, or is it for entertainment, or what's the real sort of, I guess, what was the instigator when you founded it all those years ago?
The real germ was, I had a friend, Nathan, who is now moved on, and he runs a well-respected art gallery here in Chicago up in Rogers Park called Roman Susan. Mm-hmm. And one day we were walking to see a friend tell a story at a storytelling show similar to The Moth, sort of that podcast, personal narrative style. Yeah. And he looked at me as we were halfway there and he was like, I wish you just had your own show and then all our friends would just show up there once a month. And that way I didn't have to slug all around the city. I could just go to one place, see all the people I like. I don't have to hear any of these other stories that I don't want to hear. And from that germ of an idea, we went and got coffee and burnt the midnight oil. And then we're like, okay, we're going to start a nonprofit.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So what is the secret sauce in Storyluck?
I am addicted to virtual and doing virtual stuff now. So there is that piece of the puzzle. But when we did live shows, you could always get into our shows for free if you brought food to share. And that's sort of how we did our sliding scale. Yeah. And, we'd have funny moments where people would be like, I can't pay. Can I get in? I'd be like, go across the street and buy a bag of Skittles. Then you can get in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's sort of the sense of secret sauce, is that community and sharing, and that is it. Like, it's a real connection. And our shows want to do all three pieces of the puzzle: listen, tell, and the show should be so good that you want to talk about it afterwards. You want to go home to your wife or your kids and say, I just saw the most amazing thing. I was part of something that's amazing. And so that's the secret sauce for us, is that we want the storytelling to embody a story at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's this community cohesion, there's this bridging of divides going on. Is that how stories work? Or why do stories, what is it about stories? Why do they have this kind of appeal? Why are they so powerful? And I heard you say listen, and I heard you say tell, and I heard you say also kind of share after the fact as well. So these three
Right.
components are obviously big. So there's something infectious about it. What is it? What's this whole thing about stories from your experience?
Storytelling is the vehicle to get everything that you want in life. And it starts from a baby who's thirsty, needs to tell that story to explain to the mom, I need food right now, to you being in a boardroom and trying to convince, the people who are investing in your A round that you're worth $1 million. You have to tell the story to get them invested so that they understand what's going on. It is hard to be in this realm and not oversell it. And so I want to not walk that line. There's other cool things in life other than stories, but you are constantly creating the story of your day. Even the people who think, oh, I don't tell stories, I don't have good stories, or I'm boring or whatever.
Yeah.
This is how we are wired, is we're storytelling animals. We get up, and whether it's I brushed my teeth this morning, then I made my bed, it's a logical sequence of events. You're constantly creating those all the time. There's a class I took a while ago where the guy flipped it, and he was like, if you think you don't have stories, what's really probably happening is you have too many, so you don't know how to cut them down into story format. That so much is going on in your brain, all the things that you're doing. And because this is a tangent off of this, but because we as a society are so ingrained, and because that's how our brains work, that we're constantly narrativizing our actions, it really isn't taught. You don't go to school and learn, this is how to tell the story of your life. This is how to tell the cool story of your day. Because it's just, there's this idea, you should know it. You should have picked it up through scaffolding, through osmosis, from out there. You've watched movies, you've listened to podcasts, you've listened to songs on the radio. How can you not know how to tell a story? Well, it's different. And so you don't know because no one taught you. I can't look at a Picasso. It wouldn't matter how long I looked at a Leonardo da Vinci. I couldn't recreate it. And so there's a big idea out there, I find in my teaching practice, that people think they should be good at it, but nobody ever taught them. You shouldn't be, you shouldn't be. It's not fair. Nobody taught you. And my buddy, Sean Wellington, he runs a group called Grit. And I'll get you in contact with him. He's a good guy to talk to. But he has a saying, in 6 minutes, I can make you a better storyteller. That's all it takes. You'll tell me a story, and I will give you the lessons that you need to get that story across 100 times better than it was. And I think that is sort of the level for most people, that they haven't been taught a 3-act structure. They haven't been taught these basic things: cut to the chase, start at the inciting incident. And as soon as you give these quick unlocks, stories become so much more powerful. And all of a sudden, you're the life of the party.
It's a little bit like, it's quite interesting because I'm a mindfulness practitioner, and I combine mindfulness and storytelling. And one of the things in communication everyone always talks about is no one's ever taught how to listen. So
Right.
it's kind of like listening. You're always taught to kind of say this, say that, use this word, use that word, and no one's ever taught how to listen. But actually, this is also quite interesting because we could always hear, but no one's really taught how to listen, providing
Yes.
born with the deafness or something like that. So, so you're saying
Yeah.
that,
And I think that that is also true, right, of the inner self in thinking about mindfulness. We
yeah,
don't get taught how to listen to ourselves, how to listen to our own bodies, how to listen to our own stories. They're happening,
yeah,
and we just sort of take them almost for granted. So
yeah,
that story of I got up, I brushed my teeth.
yeah,
You do that and you think, well, I want to have fresh breath. And that's what you go throughout your whole day. But if you stop and think about it, there could be a million reasons,
yeah,
right? Your mom taught you how to brush your teeth, and it's
yeah,
a sign of honoring her. You have a friend who has bad breath, and you don't want to have bad breath like him. There's a million stories, and all of them can be true at the same time.
yeah. Actually, that's so
But you
fun.
don't get there if you don't listen to yourself. If you
Yeah,
don't ever do that process of like, I'm going to do a deep listening thing. So that is why we put listening first. Like that's our number one. And I don't think people can tell their story effectively until they've listened to someone else, and they need to be listened to. So like in my teaching practice, our first lessons are just like, okay, you're just going to talk and I'm going to do this deep listening and tell you what I'm hearing. And we're going to start to gel and figure out how to get on the same page. Because if you aren't heard, a lot of times these lessons of 3-act structure, of cutting to the chase, of show don't tell, that people say all the time, you can't get them because you need to be heard first. You
yeah,
can't get to the lesson when you've got all this stuff in your chest where it's, I just need to tell you the thing.
yeah, yeah. So there's some kind of decharging going on in the story. So if we're running this narrative structure, and this narrative structure is automatic, you're helping people to, one, see the narrative structure, see that it's happening, and then two, also do some decharging as well, in like kind of offloading a little bit, so that there's space created to then go, okay, now I can create the story to deliver what I really want to say or have the impact that I really want to have. Is that kind of a good way of sort of playing it back?
Yeah, I like that. And I will add on to it that in this idea of we don't listen to ourselves, is that when you first start telling a story, you don't know why you're telling it. It's in you to tell, like, sometimes you do, of course. But for a lot of the part, you don't know why. And so you've got to tell it a couple times before you think, oh, this is the moral. You need a little bit of that back and forth feedback. And again, it goes back to that listening
Yeah.
is, what you just said above. And you got to use your language again for me.
Oh, when I said you're kind of watching or observing, being aware of this narrative, you kind of show
Yeah.
that there is a narrative running there.
Yeah. And I feel like you said something like decharge or
Decharging so they can get it off their chest. Yeah.
yeah. So that's really beautiful. And like, I would never use the word decharge if I hadn't heard you say that to me, but it is 100% what I mean and what I'm talking about. Like that's a better word than I could ever come up with through my own thoughts by just thinking about it. I needed you to do a deep listening with me for me to see myself.
Got it. So there is an element of, to develop new perspectives of your own storytelling, you do need other people. You can't, is it possible that the, I guess this is a really interesting insight actually just coming now.
Yeah.
Thanks for provoking that. So the stories, because we've heard about stories being connective tissue, we've heard of them helping bind people together and so on. And, it helps to build bridges. But I guess what I'm hearing here is something really specific, which is that without you listening, then my story is incomplete. Without me listening, then your story is incomplete. So there's almost an interdependence on each other's stories too, to a degree. I'm getting a little bit of an insight here, I think.
Yeah, I like that. Our method, and we're working on a book for it through that will be our process. That's the 5L1K method for teaching storytelling. Mm-hmm. How we talk about that is thinking about the story on your own is a good practice. It's sort of meditative. Mm-hmm. And you don't need anyone else for that to be good for you, right? You can sit alone and let your thoughts go or focus on a specific story, and that is soulful and good. But the bonuses that you get when you get to the next level, which is getting people to listen to you, are so great, right? It's sort of like that's when the ROI starts to scale in those logarithmics, is that, the base level, working on stories, even if you don't write them down, even if you don't publish them, that is good for you. Write your journal, keep it locked away. That's better than not doing that. When you share that story, right, just like you did with the word decharging, it can be just a little thing that will spark somebody's unconscious or their subconscious, and they get to go in all these directions that only they could go in, but only in combination to you. And the more you get your story out there, the more possibility for those kinds of connections. I focus primarily on the personal narrative, but I love fiction. I love science fiction. I love, H.G. Wells and time traveling and, The Expanse, sending out to other worlds, Leviathan Falls or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you get there?
Yeah.
You get there usually from a place of reality into imagination, into, okay, how do we put this into a story structure?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to talk about a little bit, right? Yeah. Because I also believe, and I want to be careful in this discussion, that structure 9 times out of 10 is descriptive rather than prescriptive, in that you think of the 3-act structure as beginning, middle, and end. Mm-hmm. Another way to think about it is, introduce the characters, introduce the setting, then give them a conflict, and then resolve the conflict. And those are your 3 parts: introduction, conflict, resolve the conflict.
Yeah.
That comes from Aristotle, but I find that it's a misconception that he was like, this is how stories should go. But really what he was saying was, this is just the way it is. If you say anything, if your story is, I got up, I brushed my teeth, I put my toothbrush away, there's 3 parts to that story. And if you cut that down and say, I got up, I went to brush my teeth, there's still a beginning, middle, end to that. And you just, once you see that structure, you can do more with it, but you can put other structures in there. They can be repetitive structures. You can find spirals, but we're so used to, in the beginning, we talked about Hollywood. Hollywood has a very specific save the cat, plot twist on page 75 structure.
Yeah.
That creates a really beautiful lexicon that we can understand and anticipate what's happening culturally in this sort of grand connected sense. Yeah. But it also is limited if you think that's the way it has to be, rather than this is a structure I can lay over top of a story.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. I was just actually wondering, you know, in terms of limitation, maybe the structure sometimes uh doesn't really help.
Yeah.
Or even maybe there are other ways. You just mentioned like Hollywood has just got the one of the best known ways, or one of the most easily recognizable ways.
Right, right.
But what would you say the limitations are around the kind of storytelling? Are there any limitations around storytelling? And conversely,
Yeah.
what would you say the, I guess, the best uses are going forward in terms of where we are as a human race and everything else? How do you want to see stories change or evolve going forward?
Yeah, that's great. So there's a lot in there. Limitation wise,
Mhm.
I think trying to describe emotion through language is difficult.
Yeah.
And there's something about paints and music and the abstraction, especially of when it's taken away from language, that touches emotion closer than anything else. If you listen to a piece that's sad and is aiming for a very specific sadness,
Yeah.
I think you get there more specifically, more targeted to like everybody who listens to that piece of music is in sync on the same page as to what that sadness is,
Yeah.
then a story could get them.
So can you tell a story with music? Or what happens then when,
Right.
is it
Right.
still a story? Is it still a story then? Or do you just not need the story anymore? Because actually what the story was intending, the music's already delivered. So therefore it's kind of like a layer removed. Is that maybe what you're saying is stories are very much predicated on the interpretation of something, whereas music maybe doesn't need interpreting? I don't know. I'm just exploring this now.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it breaks down. Like, I think if you're lots of people do try to tell stories in their music, and lyrics are a big way to imbue that. But if we're talking about getting an audience on the same page, uh, no, story's the best way to do that. A one-on-one talking to someone where you're really connecting to them, that is the best way to convey a narrative where they see you and you're building the you're reimagining it, you're embodying it in yourself, you're remembering that scene and you're describing that to the person. I think that is the most connected way to tell a story. I think that's better than a movie. I think it's better than anything else.
Yeah, which is why the personal narrative is your speciality.
Right.
Helping. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what can we do then now as a human race with our stories? What do we need to do differently? Do we need to do anything differently? Do you want to see more of anything or less of anything as it pertains to storytelling?
Everybody should be doing this practice. There's a guy, Matthew Dix, who is a big moth storyteller, and he's big into journaling 2 sentences a day. The most story-worthy thing that you can do, you have, write those 2 sentences down. What happened in the day? I think that sort of practice is really good for people. I am big into writing. I'm big into publishing all the time. There's so many outlets that you can leverage through social media. Twitter is a great place for writers. Write your story and see who you connect to. When we were doing live shows, a big piece for us was that idea of I want to put people on the stage who would have never met otherwise and have them talk about what's important to them and have an audience see both the similarities and the dissimilarities there and those sorts of connections from people. So like, if you start with listening, look for stories outside your comfort zone a little bit. Like, where are stories being told that you wouldn't get those stories otherwise? And how do you create a loop so you get those more regularly? I think that, you know, there's a lot of little good practices. And then for your telling your stories, I think anybody in the audience, one, you can find me at Storyluck on Twitter. I want to hear your story. I always have scheduled time open. Just schedule with me. I'll sit and listen. It's free, half an hour. Tell me a story and we'll just hang out. But outside of that, you have a whole friend group who is interested in your day. Write a short story about what happened to you and post on your Facebook, post on your Twitter, and, you know, try to keep it up for 30 days and tell me how it goes. You know, I think it's life-changing. And when you tell your stories and you get to that theme, you get to that idea of what's the most important thing, then you start structuring around that deeper issue. How do I emphasize, how do I make this story so it builds to this thing? And you can find different things, but it's deeper than show, don't tell. It's deeper than beginning, middle, and end. There's something behind those structures that we want. And that's about engaging with an audience. It's about being understood. It's about sending out a message. I like to think of stories that are crafted in this personal narrative form as gifts. I have something that I just want to freely give away and people can accept it, you know, whether it's a moral, whether it's just, I saw a giant, you know, right? And I just want to, I saw it in my mind. And so I'm going to tell the Jack and the Beanstalk story in such a way that people understand how big that dude was. If that's the most important thing to me, then that's what I'm focusing on. And you don't have to accept it. You don't have to do anything with it. It's yours to do with as you wish, but I'm just giving it away. And that's the place that I want to get to when I'm at Story. And finding that thing that's the most important thing is helpful to finding what those deeper meanings are behind the rules of writing and the rules of writing stories.
Oh, before you go, I just want to say thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe to my channel. It means a lot more than you know. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Bye for now.